Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Oscar Buzz. Trevor here. I'm joined by Thomas. Tottenham lost to North London Derby yesterday, so I'm depressed. But we're talking about a different sport today. We're talking about
God,
challengers and tennis and all of the things. Tennis is a relationship between two people,
indeed.
as Zendaya says. Tashi Duncan, I believe. Tashi
Tashi
Duncan.
Duncan, indeed.
Tashi Duncan. Latest from Luca Guadagnino. I got Call Me by Your Name right behind me. Coming off of Bones and All, which I think is his best work, to be honest. I absolutely adore Bones and All. And Challengers, I liked, was not as in love with it as I was some of his previous work, which we'll get into. But I mean, just a very, very fun film. It's a hard film to dislike, really.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I've been a big fan of a lot of his work. Call Me by Your Name is up there as one of my favorites. I love Bones and All. Suspiria is amazing. Big Splash is amazing. And this is right up there for me. It's right up there. I think he is another hit on his hands with this one. I think it's a film with real energy. It knows exactly what it wants to be, and it just hits on every beat that it is trying to be. And I think that is so respectable in a film a lot of times when you just see a vision come to life and you just know this is exactly how the director anticipated it coming out. This is exactly what he wanted. And it's just put screen on such a passionate and energetic way, as you say, that it is almost impossible to like actively dislike in my book.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. No, I mean it's just a fun time. Like I was able to see it in IMAX a few days early at one of the like early screening things, and like it's just such a fun environment. Like in the theater, like I mean, people were like screaming, laughing, yelling. Like it was just it's a really really as I said, just energetic
It's a
film.
very easy film to like quite viscerally react to. Like
Yeah,
there are certain
well,
moments where you are
like
just like, ooh, like laughing out
I mean,
loud
you
and stuff
become
like
the
that.
POV of a tennis ball at point, like,
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
all over,
no,
and,
it
like,
is.
some of those big swings, I wasn't entirely a massive fan of, like, especially some of the tennis stuff, like, it's very maximalist in a way that I don't necessarily personally vibe with, but I still respect it, I guess. Like,
Yeah.
I respect the maximalist swings even if they aren't entirely, um, my thing or what I would have wanted from it.
For me,
Um,
all of those kind of things were just, I felt they were just so innovative. Like I've never been put in the POV of a tennis ball
that's
before,
fair.
and I'm very here for it. It was so in keeping with, I think, the tone of the rest of the film, because the film is, it's not a serious drama. It's not realist in the way that like Call Me by Your Name is. Incredibly naturalistic and real. It's not that at all. It's this complete, it operates on its like own level in a way like sort of May December did last year, where it's just you think
Yeah.
this is not, you're doing a sort of hyper reality kind of thing. And so I do think that all of these maximalist choices, particularly towards the end, a lot of them only really come towards the end. There's bits of like editing where it's like edited like a tennis match or whatever. There is a
Mhm.
lot of that kind of thing, but it's more in the background. It's not as noticeable. It is in the sort of final climactic tennis sequence where it goes, shit hits the fan, and it just goes absolutely mental.
Yeah.
And it's so
It's
fun. It's so
all over
fun,
the
and it
place.
really keeps you in that game that whole time.
Yeah, yeah. And to be critical for a second, you brought up May December. I feel like this movie did at points want to be May December, and I don't know if it entirely got there for me. Because I think why May December works so well is because it's really, really dense on a thematic level, while doing this hyper reality, melodrama camp
Which,
type thing.
I mean, that even adds to the layers of depth and layers of meaning that you just
Exactly,
mentioned.
exactly. It expands upon itself, and those two elements I think interact in a really like genius and beautiful way. Whereas I think that this had the hyper reality melodrama, camp bits. This movie's very funny as well. Like it's a very
Yeah.
funny film, but I don't think it necessarily has that thematic depth that something like May December did to bring it to the next level, where it feels like each bit of hyper reality and melodrama is like building on the last. Whereas I do think that this, for me at least, within the third act, did hit a point where it was feeling like it was hitting the same notes, and not really growing in a way that I would have liked a big, climactic sequence at the end to do so. Just because I didn't feel like it quite earned those moments, through its narrative, through its themes, earlier on in the film. in the same way that just used that as an example, May December, I think does.
Yeah. No, I think that is a valid criticism. I'd say where it does earn it is through the characters' moments. Like, it really grounds itself in ensuring that you are engaged in these characters. I think they're very efficiently set up, even in the first scene where, like, because it plays about with time, which is, it does that in a very interesting way. I will say how it plays about with time. It does it very naturally as well, in a way that's very easy to follow, despite the sheer number of time jumps it makes, and all of that kind of stuff. It's very clear throughout, and there's very clear reason for those time jumps. But it keeps you grounded in these characters. And I do think that all three performances are really excellent, some of the best I've seen in 2024 so far. I thought Mike Faist was potentially the weakest of the three, but that's not a negative. Like, he is still very strong.
Yeah,
in what he's doing.
I feel like he almost has the least to do. I feel like most of
It's
his
the
big moments
easiest
are playing
role.
off. Like his
Yeah,
big moments are playing off of the other two. He's a much more
yeah.
passive character, whereas the other two are much more, I think, assertive and take their bigger moments for themselves. I feel
It
in a
is
way.
it is the easiest role, and he doesn't. And I think it's because, as you say, he doesn't get that opportunity to really go big on his own, where
Yeah,
you're like, it's just you on the screen, and I'm just watching you. Whereas Zendaya,
right.
I think you do get that. Josh O'Connor, I do think you get that in abundance. And I'd say out of three, I'd say he's probably the one I'd rank highest. But either way, all three work together so
I
well,
think
and it's the
Zendaya's performance.
chemistry.
Sorry to cut you off. I think that Zendaya's.
Maybe,
I thought it was
maybe.
really good.
I think that Josh O'Connor just had such a screen presence and charisma and command, where he was the character I was always wanting to see where they're going to go with him. So maybe that's down to performance, maybe that's just down to him
Sure.
being the most interesting character. Either way, he was the character I
Plus,
was most engaged in.
more attractive, O'Connor faced.
Maybe, but
I go O'Connor. I go
who
O'Connor.
knows? Who knows?
So
Yes, probably.
you know,
I would agree with that. But
right. So
still, the point still stands. He's the most engaging
maybe you
character.
just wanted to see him on screen more.
Maybe that's true. Maybe that's true. Hey, the sauna scene was probably my favorite scene in the entire film.
Or
I thought that was so funny.
the churro scene.
The churro scene. Yeah, that was good. That was a good scene as well.
Grabs
Yeah.
his chair with his leg.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
the
That was an amazing moment, actually. There are so many amazing moments in this film
I
where
mean,
it's like, it really
like
captures something.
I guess minor spoilers if you haven't seen it, but them talking about the one, I think it was Josh O'Connor teaching Mike Faist how to masturbate.
Yes, and this was the scene I was going to bring up. It's been a while since I really felt I was in the room with a film. You know how you just feel like you're in this conversation. I felt like, well, I wasn't in the conversation, but I felt like I was sitting there just laughing with mates, and it's the chemistry. This leads back to the point where I think it's where this film really shines and where May December. Yeah, I don't know why we keep going to May December.
I know I keep on talking.
It's a good point of comparison.
Yeah.
Where that film really shined was in the chemistry that is built between his core
Yeah.
very early on, and I think this is the same, where it builds that chemistry, and from there allows the narrative to just spiral and go bigger and bigger, because it's still rooted in the idea that you want to see these characters interact with one another.
Sure. No, I think, I mean, all three of them have an amazing screen presence. Again, the thing is, I think some of it doesn't go beyond. They have a brilliant screen presence and chemistry, but I wanted to get more into some of the deeper layers and the nuances of this love triangle, because it is a rare love triangle where all corners touch. And like, I do think that there's genuine attraction through all sides of the love triangle, right? Like I saw someone describe it as like Josh O'Connor and Mike Faist's relationship is platonically non-platonic, like
probably good. Yeah, that's
and but yeah, I think that there's so many things to dive into, and I think that the film was more interested in just being like this like campy, vibey, maximalist romp, which is fine, and I think it does do a good job of getting across those vibes, and it is a very fun time. But I do think that it left a bit on the table that I think if it dived into, it could have made those final moments even more impactful. Whereas again, I felt like it potentially just started hitting the same note, and we could have gotten some interesting melodies to expand on the
Maybe
musical
I can
analogy.
see why someone could think that this is a film that does spin its wheels a little bit
Mhm.
and does just ride off the momentum it's built rather
Which again,
than
I'm not complaining
going
about
out
having
and
an
do it.
incredibly fun, like vibey momentum thing,
But yeah,
but
I do
I
think
just
the momentum is strong enough to. I guess it's just my mind. I think the momentum is strong enough to just propel it to being completely
sure.
engaging the entire way through. But yes, I could see where that argument would come from, but it's not one that personally really bothered me. The fact that it does spin its wheel, it does get a little bit sort of narratively, at least, repetitive, but it's so. And I think the dialogue is so well written as well. I do think it's
Yeah.
an excellently written film where it's really naturalistic dialogue in a lot, where really do you feel that the characters are people speaking to one
Mhm.
another in very distinctive ways. And I think a great point of example is even like the little grandma moments where the grandma's
Yeah.
trying to get, they feel so real and they just really ground this world. And it's that juxtaposition between the ground and then the hyper reality that really create this very distinctive, very unique feeling for the film that I think does allow you to be engaged throughout because you're always wanting to see what the film will do next. And in the climax of a film, it really does do a lot of things that you weren't expecting it to do.
Yes.
So
Yeah. No, for sure, for sure. Like, like hotel sequence or the night before sequence, I think is really, really well done. And that's where I do think that the structuring of the film comes into play. Like, I think that the structuring of this film is brilliant. I almost think the structuring is more like the narrative structuring is more interesting than the narrative itself at points, which, you know, it could be potentially an issue. I do think that there isn't that much to chew on within the narrative, but I do think it makes up for it by just being brilliantly structured, and it takes a
brilliant
narrative
told.
that
Yeah.
isn't necessarily doing that much and makes it very interesting through the structure there. And yeah, the having that be the last flashback right before we get into the final set, and essentially structuring the entire film around the flow and the momentum of a tennis match, and the highs and lows of of that sporting event, and hitting us with that final realization. I mean, we'll go into spoilers of Tashi basically trying to rig the match
Yeah.
the night beforehand, and then getting to that payoff afterwards. I think really, really just brilliant structuring from Celine Song's husband, whatever his
Yes.
name is.
Yeah.
Justin, I don't know.
Yeah. But yes, no, I totally agree. Obviously, the tennis match structuring is an obvious point, but it does work, and it is
Yeah.
something again I haven't seen before. And I really like the way the stakes are maintained throughout. A lot of films they build towards bigger and bigger stakes. Here,
Hmm.
it's quite unconventional. The fact that the stakes at the beginning is in terms of who's going to get the number, who's going to, etc., are pretty much as big to the characters as the stakes at the
Hmm.
end, and it keeps this constant, like you're constantly sitting on edge, you're constantly tense. But also it's light and it's breezy and it's fun to watch as well. So it's that sort of balancing of fun and tension that really worked for me about this film as well. And it's through creating those stakes and keeping those stakes very high throughout that I think it achieves that, which is fairly unconventional for film narratives.
Yeah, yeah, no. And also like a lot of the way even if some of the more maximalist stuff didn't work for me, a lot of the way that the tennis was shot, I think, because tennis, let's be honest, kind of boring.
Yeah, yeah.
But we were talking a bit beforehand because we've been going through a lot of Lucas films, and he uses zooms in a very
Mm.
interesting way, in a very poor way with Melissa P, one of his early films.
Yeah.
And then like in a very like the way that they're used in Suspiria is really, really
Mm.
fascinating. And I think we see that a lot here, like like both in camera, because like there's some in camera zooms and then some that just look like dolly in and out, and they're mixed in a really interesting way within the edit, to push and pull with like your emotions in a lot of ways, within these dynamics between characters. There was this like viral tweet that came out when a clip of the film came out,
Yeah,
and
I was
they're
actually
like
going to mention that. Yeah.
there are 16 cuts in this in 1 minute. Open up the film schools, which I think is just a very you know films don't inherently need to follow along with a certain amount of cuts. If there is need for 16 cuts, then there's need for 16 cuts.
Yeah.
Um,
And it's deliberately disjointed, it's
Right.
deliberately
And
jarring you,
I
and
do
you're
think
trying
that
to take
there
it
are
about
films that
something.
are over edited, but I don't think that this film really suffers from it. And I think a lot of that comes down to the variety of how Luca frames things within those cuts. It isn't like we're cutting back and forth rapidly, just over the shoulder to the same looking shots. Very rarely do we see a shot and then we return back to the same angle or the same lens, right? Like
Mm,
there's almost always variance, and it's almost always keeping you on your toes and off-putting you almost within the visual
yeah.
language of the film,
And
which
it's
I
giving
think is
you the
really,
sense
really
of,
well executed.
yeah, unpredictability, which matches in turn what the
Yes,
narrative was trying to do, where it's trying to be this twisty turny thing, which I think it achieves for the most part, but that is also, yeah, as you say, mirrored in this slightly jarring style that it
yeah,
goes for.
for sure, for sure. So yeah, no, I mean, really, really strong from a filmmaking perspective. Like, I think just a lot of my issues with this do just come within the writing, but I think where I think that the structure is very good, but maybe the contents within the structure could have been a bit stronger to go alongside with I think a lot of the brilliant stuff that Luke is doing, and the stuff with the performances. Now, I told you this beforehand.
Mm,
The one thing that I'm going to like actively come out as a hater,
yeah.
and I fully admit that this is probably a bad take. I did not like the score. The score took me out of the film every single time. I think it's very overbearing and overused. And to go back to the May December thing, I think that score, its campiness and its melodrama works very well because of the established thematic depth within the film to where that works in conjunction. This felt like it was trying to like I don't know. It felt like there wasn't enough confidence in the film getting there on its own with that feeling, and that the score just needed to beat you over the head with this is the vibe of the movie. And I feel like Luke already did that, and it just felt like overkill in a way, and a really kind of obnoxious way. I know everybody on Twitter and Letterboxd is like, oh my god, the score. I get it. I think this is a Babylon thing where I think that the Babylon score is one of the greatest scores ever, and there's a lot of people that hate it and think it's incredibly obnoxious. I just think this is a similar thing. I don't know why. I just really intentionally do not fuck with the score, um, on a personal level, and I understand how the Babylon people felt when they hated the Babylon score. I don't get it. I don't think it's good. I think it's very annoying. I will get off my soapbox. That is
Yeah.
the one.
No,
Yeah,
I get the overuse criticism. I do think it is potentially overused, but that's part of me also thinks that is sort of the point. Like, I think the first time the score kicks in, it really did take me out of the film. I'll be honest, the first time it kicks in, but then when it keeps doing it, like, okay, this is, and it's sort of in like it in itself is sort of testing you and bringing you along with this vibe. So I do think it's very necessary part of this film. I really do think it is integral in keeping
I
you
admit that
going,
I'm
keeping
probably
you
wrong
entertained.
about
So
this. Like,
yeah, and I
I
quite like the sound as well. It just, as you say, it gives it this raw sort of energy that
yeah,
is very distinctive, and I really haven't seen before in many other films. And just
no,
take this thing, and you're like, even when it's played in like the really melodramatic moments, it's like windy outside, there's a massive storm or something, and then still is playing.
I thought the
I
sound the
just thought
sound the sound mixing was really good.
yeah,
Like,
yeah. But I
the
just
sound
thought
mixing
every
was
time it played it, it did have a use. And I think part of me thinks that the more times it was played, the better it sort of got, because the more it just sort of brought you
sure.
along in it. It was like a
Maybe it
guiding
would grow on me
presence
if I
throughout.
watched it again, if I know it going like,
Maybe.
there's a
Yeah,
chance. But
yeah,
that was the one thing that really annoyed me for whatever reason about the film. But I don't want to end on a negative note. Overall, very good film, very fun. Would happily watch it again.
definitely,
Um,
definitely.
uh, Again, just the chemistry between them. I've seen some people saying that this is not a sexy movie. What's sexy then? Explain to
Yeah,
me. Like it's we need more just unabashedly like horny movies.
yeah.
Um,
And Luca Guadagnino is good at doing that.
I mean, listen,
He's
the
good at
man belongs
making.
in horny jail. Like,
Yeah, yeah,
I, this is the type of film that we need to be, and the type of director that we need to be giving a bunch of money to. And I think this had like a $50 million budget, and I hope that it's able to make
definitely.
back its money, and
Yeah,
do quite well at the box office. Because like, even if not all of it was entirely for me, like this is the type of cinema we need, right? Like,
definitely.
it's yeah, and there's so much to love within this movie. Like immaculate vibes, really brilliant structuring. Like, I think most people will really respond to the Maximalist swings from Luca.
Yeah,
So
amazing performances as well
yeah,
to top it all off. And yeah, on a sort of ending note as well, I do think the film ends in a very brilliant way. I was like, I thought he'd written himself into a corner a little bit with how he's going to end it, but
yeah,
somehow that moment where he's jumping down, he catches him was perfect.
yeah,
Was everything I wanted, but just didn't know that I needed in my life. But yeah, that
sure,
ending note was just perfect and just maybe leave the cinema beaming, like beaming. Yeah.
sure,
So
sure, sure. That's fair. What do you feel on a rating?
I'm gonna go 9. I'm gonna go 9. I think this is one of the best films I've seen all year. It's definitely up there with June. Definitely up there with How to Have Sex. I think Monkey Man as well. It's in that upper echelon of stuff that I've seen this year. So
Sure. I'm
yeah,
at a strong 7. As I like the movie a lot, had a bit more issues with it, but undeniably, it just a great time. So yeah, if for some reason you've watched this even after we've talked about spoilers and you haven't seen the film, definitely go watch the movie.
indeed.
But yeah, let us know your thoughts below. It's in the upper. I think I'm at 53 new releases for 2024, and I think this is at 13 or 14 for me. So
Okay,
it's in like the top third, top fourth ish.
good, good.
So yeah, very, very strong film. But yes, definitely let us know what you think below. This is not a Dune situation, so do not. Um, yeah. Uh,
Been a bit more divisive in June as well. There'll be a lot more people on your level, whereas with June you were in a pretty low
I
minority.
was I
But
was like the one person, but
yeah,
you know, what do you do? But those are our thoughts on challengers. We'll probably be reviewing, I don't know, the Fall Guy next.
probably.
Evil Does Not Exist, the new Ryusuke Hamaguchi.
Or Love Lies Bleeding, maybe
Or Love
as
Lies
well.
Bleeding. Yeah. Yeah, if that's out for
29.
you.
It's out
That
Friday, so
one of my favorite movies of the year. I don't care that it's been out for a couple months. I want to talk about this shit with you. I loved
yeah.
it. So fucking good. But reviews, streams, all the things soon. But until then, thank everybody for watching. Stay safe and goodbye.